Hello and welcome to the presentation video of results from Ireland's Labour Force Survey, or LFS, for Q4 2025. The LFS is a household survey carried out by the Central Statistics Office and is the official source for employment and unemployment estimates in Ireland. The official labour market classification of respondents to the survey is based on International Labour Organization, or ILO, concepts and definitions. And you can find out more information about the survey from our website or by contacting us at labour@cso.ie. The published infographic for Q4 is shown in this slide and presents headline LFS results for the quarter. The number of people in employment was a record 2,833,100, up 2.0% from Q4 2024. There were 128,200 classified as unemployed, an increase of 10.4% on last year. The number of actual hours worked per week in Q4 was 88.1 million hours, up 2.9% from the same quarter in 2024. And the number of people who said they never work from home was 1,866,000, exceeding the pre-pandemic figure for the first time. The 4-year trend in seasonally adjusted labour status estimates is shown in this slide. The seasonally adjusted number of persons in employment was a record 2,834,300, an increase of 0.5% on the previous quarter and up 11.2% over the 4 years. The seasonally adjusted number of persons unemployed was 137,200. That's down 8,200 or 5.6% on the previous quarter and down 2,000 or 1.4% over the 4 years. The seasonally adjusted number of people outside the labour force increased 0.5% from the previous quarter to 1,524,800. Focusing now on the results for employment in Q4. As mentioned, the estimate for the number of people in employment was 2,833,100, an increase of 56,700 or 2.0% compared with Q4 2024. The employment rate for persons aged 15 to 64 is 74.5%. That's up 0.2 percentage points relative to a year ago. The seasonally adjusted estimate for the number in employment in Q4 was more than 2.8 million, increasing by 15,300 or 0.5% compared with the last quarter, Q3 2025. The chart here shows the seasonally adjusted estimate for males and females in employment over the previous 4 years. It shows that employment increased for both males and females. Males in employment increased by 16,900 or 1.1% to more than 1.5 million, while females in employment were 1,332,700, an increase of 5,600 or 0.4%. Over the 4-year period, males in employment have grown by 11.2%, while females in employment grew 11.6%. This slide shows the employment rate, that is the percentage of working age population in employment. This has increased slightly from 74.3% to 74.5%. For males in Q4 2025, the employment rate was 78.4%, up 0.4 percentage points from 78.0% a year ago, while the employment rate for females stood at 70.6% this quarter, unchanged from last year, but up 0.8 percentage points from 2023. The chart in this slide presents the employment for different age groups for Q4 2024 and 25. The largest age cohort in employment is the 35 to 44-year-olds at 691,100. However, employment in this group has decreased 9,300 from just over 700,000 in 2024. Employment in the 25 to 34-year-olds also declined 1,400 to 565,900. The largest increase was in the 45 to 54-year-olds. Employment in this age cohort increased 30,200 to 672,100. Similarly, the 55 to 64-year-olds and the 65 and older age groups increased to 445,500 and 135,300 respectively. This is further illustrated by the annual change in employment by age groups. The 25 to 34 and the 35 to 44-year-olds declined by 0.2 and 1.3% respectively, while youth employment those aged 15 to 24, increased by 1.6%, the only age group under 45 to do so. All age groups over 45 increased in employment. The largest percentage increase was among the 65 and older group, up 7.2%. The 55 to 64-year-olds increased 5.2%, while the 45 to 54 age group increased 4.7%. This chart here shows the annual change in hours worked per week in millions by age group. While the number in employment declined for the 25 to 34 and the 35 to 44-year-olds, the actual hours increased by 100,000 and 200,000 hours respectively. The largest increase in actual hours worked among the 45 to 54-year-olds, increasing by 1 million, while the 55 to 64-year-olds increased by 800,000 hours. Youths were the only age group to have a decrease in hours worked, down 100,000 hours. The estimates for full-time and part-time employment is shown in this slide. The number of full-time workers and part-time workers increased over the year to Q4 2025. The more than 2.25 million in full-time employment is an increase of 2.5%, or almost 55,000 since the last year. There was a smaller increase in part-time employment. It increased by 0.3% in the year to 582,600. And this led to a rise in total actual hours worked per week in Q4 2025 to an estimated 88.1 million hours, up by 2.5 million hours, or 2.9% in the year. The chart here shows the hours worked per week by NACE sector for Q4 2025 in green and 2024 in red. Industry had the largest increase in hours worked, increasing by 900,000 hours to 12.1 million. This is followed by education, up 700,000 hours to 6.6 million hours worked per week. The largest decreases were in the professional, scientific and technical, down 400,000 hours to 6.1 million, as well as information and communication, down 200,000 hours to 5.8 million. There were also declines in the accommodation and food services sector, administration and support services, and public administration and defence. While the chart here shows the top growing industrial sectors by employment volume growth in Q4 2025 compared to a year ago. The industry sector had the largest increase, adding 22,000 jobs, an increase of 6.6% to 354,300. This is followed by education, up by 18,500 or 7.7% to 258,300. And construction, which increased by 15,900 or 9.0% to 191,900. This slide shows the bottom sectors by change in volume growth. There were decreases in the number of persons employed in information and communication. That's down 12,700 or 7.0% to 170,200. Professional, scientific and technical, which decreased 8,800 or 4.5% to 189,700. The administration and support services was down 5,600 or 5.6% to 94,500. In terms of seasonally adjusted estimates, we can see that industry increased for 4 consecutive quarters and is up 2.5% on the previous quarter to 357,100. Information and communication has seen 3 quarters of decline in employment and is down 0.5% on the last quarter to 175,200, while professional, scientific and technical activities was down 4.6% on the previous quarter to 192,500. The chart in this slide shows the number of employed people by the status of their employment for the last 2 years. In the latest quarter, the number of employees increased by 35,900 to 2,435,600, an increase of 1.5%. There were 26,200 more people who classified themselves as self-employed compared to a year ago, an increase of 7.4%. Of the self-employed, the largest increase was among self-employed without paid employees, which increased by 20,700 or 8.5% to 263,700. Assisting relatives decreased by 5,400 to 19,000. The chart here shows employed persons by their working location for the last 3 years. In Q4 2025, those who never work from home increased to 1,865,600, up 74,200 from last year and 103,400 from 2023. As a proportion, those who never work from home also increased from 64.8% to 66.1%. 530,500 people worked usually from home, defined as at least 50% of their days work from the previous 4 weeks, down from 539,900 in Q4 2024. A further 426,300 were working from home sometimes, up from 432,800. And this slide shows those changes in percentage terms. Those that never work from home increased by 4.1%, while those that usually or sometimes work from home declined by 1.7% and 1.5% respectively. Turning now to unemployment, and using standard ILO criteria, the number of persons aged 15 to 74 who were unemployed in Q4 stood at 128,200, with an associated unemployment rate of 4.4%. The number unemployed was up 12,100 or 10.4% when compared to Q4 2024, when the unemployment rate was 4.0%. The seasonally adjusted estimate for the number unemployed was 137,200, down by 8,200 or 5.6% on the previous quarter. And the seasonally adjusted unemployment rate in Q4 was 4.6%, down by 0.3 percentage points on the previous quarter. The chart in this slide shows the seasonally adjusted unemployment rate for males, females, and all persons aged 15 to 74 over the last 4 years. The seasonally adjusted male unemployment rate is 4.7%, down from 5.0% from Q3, while the seasonally adjusted female unemployment rate also decreased from 4.9% to 4.6%. The unemployment rate for Q4 this year and last year shows the increase in the unemployment rate for both males and females. The male unemployment rate increased slightly from 4.3% to 4.4%, while the female unemployment rate is up 0.5 percentage points to 4.3%. The chart in this slide shows the volume of unemployment by age groups for Q4 2024 and 25. Unemployment has increased for all working age cohorts except youths aged 15 to 24, which has remained unchanged at 35,000. The largest increase were among the 35 to 44-year-olds, which increased 5,900 or 29.8% to 25,500, while the 25 to 34-year-olds increased by 2,300 or 8.0% to 30,600. The chart here shows unemployed by duration of unemployment for the last 2 years. 36,200 people were classified as long-term unemployed, that is, unemployment for 12 months or longer, up 28,200 in 2024. This accounted for 29.0% of all unemployed people, compared to 25.0% the previous year. The long-term unemployment rate for persons aged 15 to 74 stood at 1.2% in Q4. Turning attention to the overall labour force, and the ILO defined labour force, which comprised all persons aged 15 and over who were classified as either employed or unemployed, was estimated to be more than 2.96 million in Q4. That's up 2.4% on a year ago. The estimated participation rate in Q4 was 65.8%, up 0.3 percentage points, and the seasonally adjusted participation rate was 66.1%. That's unchanged from last quarter. The chart in this slide shows the seasonally adjusted participation rates for males, females, and all persons aged 15 and over a 4-year period, and shows that labour market participation has been reasonably stable, with the participation rate remaining unchanged for 3 quarters. The chart in this slide looks at the estimated number of people in the labour force by age groups, and shows that there has been a growth in labour market participation among almost all age categories except those aged 35 to 44 in the year to Q4, which declined 3,400 to 716,600. There was a slight increase in the 25 to 34-year-olds of 900, while youths increased by 6,000. The largest increase was among the older age groups. The 35 and older age category increased by 9,800 to 137,100. The number of people in the labour force by citizenship for Q4 24 and 25 is shown in this slide. The number of citizens from Ireland, the European Union and the rest of the world all increased year on year, while there was a slight drop from citizens in the United Kingdom. There were more than 2.3 million Irish citizens in the labour force, while citizens from the rest of the world increased by 33,400 to 312,500. And this slide here shows that this represents a 12.0% increase in citizens from the rest of the world. Citizens from the European Union increased 4.5%, while Irish citizens increased 1.1%. Citizens from the UK in the labour force declined by 1.6%. And this gave rise to an overall increase in the labour force of 68,800 to 2,961,300 in Q4. There was a positive demographic effect of 44,000 and a positive participation effect of 24,800 over the year. And this led to a slight increase in the participation rate over the year of 0.3 percentage points to 65.8%. The seasonally adjusted labour force also increased by 11,300 or 0.4% on the previous quarter to 2,973,800. The estimated number of people who are classified as not in the labour force was 1,535,900, up 14,000 or 0.9% on the previous year. The potential additional labour force, that is people who would like to work but are either available but are not actively seeking work, or seeking work but are not immediately available to begin, was 111,400. A decrease of 2,300 or 2.0% compared with a year ago. Those that do not want a job increased by 1,900 to 969,000. Those active and over 75 increased by 17,900 to 368,300, while those that want a job but are not available and not seeking declined 3,400 to 83,800 in Q4 2025. Labour market slack, which comprises unemployed, part-time underemployed and a potential additional labour force, is shown in this slide here for Q4 2025 as well as the previous year. The total for labour market slack in Q4 was 360,900 people, an increase of 5,200 or 1.5% on the same quarter last year. However, this was driven solely by unemployment, as the potential additional labour force and part-time underemployment fell by 2,300 and 4,600 respectively. Focusing now on young people, those aged 15 to 24 years in the labour market. The employment rate was 46.0%, down 0.1 percentage points on the year. The unemployment rate was 9.8%, down 0.2 percentage points. The participation rate is 51.0%, down 0.2 percentage points. And the NEET rate, that is the percentage of 15 to 24-year-olds not in employment, education or training, was 6.3%, an increase of 0.8 percentage points. And so, to summarise the Q4 labour force survey results. Employment has increased 56,700 or 2.0% to a record 2,833,100. Of this, 54,700 was full-time employment, and this has led to a 2.9% increase in the total actual hours worked per week of 88.1 million hours. The employment rate for those aged 15 to 64 increased by a more modest 0.2 percentage points to 74.5%. For unemployment, we have seen an increase of 12,100 to 128,200, a 10.4% increase. And this gave rise to an increase in the unemployment rate to 4.4%. The rise in unemployed were in all age groups except youths, which remained unchanged. The increase in both employment and unemployment meant that the labour force grew to a record of nearly 3 million, and an increase in the participation rate of 0.3 percentage points to 66.8%. Finally, the CSO published results on volunteering in Ireland based on additional questions asked of those aged 15 to 74 in the Labour Force Survey in Q2 2025. The results show that overall, the estimated number of people aged 15 to 74 who volunteered in Q2 2025 was 654,400, or 16.1%. The largest number of volunteers were involved in sporting organisations, with 261,000 persons, or 6.4%. The estimated total number of hours volunteered in Q2 2025 was 7.5 million hours per month, which amounts to 11.5 hours per person a month. Other LFS thematics due to be published in the coming quarters include sports participation, remote working, and quality of work. That concludes the results presentation for the Labour Force Survey for Q4 2025. LFS quarterly results for Q1 2026 are scheduled for publication in May 2026. This release will begin using the new NACE Rev 2.1 classification. This updated EU-wide system of classification replaces NACE 2.0 and would better reflect emerging economic activities and provide more accurate picture of the Irish economy. For more information on the upcoming change, you can visit our website cso.ie. Thanks for watching.